everyone.
Hello.
It's that Monday night, and I was kind of delaying it a little bit because I think they were running a bit slow in the dining room, but we can't continue on. Remember, masks up, nose and mouth. Sorry about that. And do I have to tell you what? Phones off. Thank you.
That might be a good idea for me.
Because we don't want the phone to interrupt Trudy's story.
Please, no.
No.
How do you? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yes, perfect.
Unless there's something that's totally essential to know, and I'll be the judge.
Trudy is a great person to work with. It's been a pleasure, it really is. And tonight we have Trudy Schragal, and I know how to pronounce it because it rhymes with bagel. In case any of you have been hesitant about using her last name, now you got the clue. Trudy has been here since when?
October of 18.
Pioneer.
Not really.
No, not a pioneer. Almost a pioneer.
Yeah.
Yes. She did not chase the Native Americans off the land. It was already taken over.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who've lived in the area, this was Bell and Howell until they decided to not be Bell and Howell. Okay, Trudy needs very little introduction. She is our presidente of the Residence Council and has done so many things here that if you've been involved in any activities, Trudy was involved, so you know her. But we don't know the real Trudy. Correct? It's all coming out tonight. Now, do you want to do your visual first or as we go along?
I'll start the story there.
Okay, all right. Well, you were born, you're an Illinoisan.
I am an Illinoisan.
From West Frankfort?
That's the hospital I was born in.
Oh, okay, all right.
The actual town was called Buckner. Buckner.
Buckner. Anyone know where Buckner, Illinois is? Do you really? Oh my goodness. Trudy, there was another family living there.
My mom came from Ziegler.
Ziegler?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's right down the road.
I was born in Heron Hospital.
Heron, okay. Heron was like the city. Yeah.
It's a small world.
It's a small word, and Walt Disney made a fortune on that. He put those crazy people singing and you're riding a boat. It drives you nuts by the time you get out of there.
Very good. So Trudy was born in the hospital in West Frankfort.
Mm-hmm.
And then her family rushed her home because she was number one child. Correct? Well, you were the first child. You were the
Princess.
You were the princess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Trudy told me something very interesting, very beautiful, that her parents were like Romeo and Juliet.
My grandparents.
Grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
One generation before. You want to explain that?
Sure. I'm going to use the telestrator. What's this?
Italy.
That's right.
A boot.
This is northern Italy, where all the smart Italians live. And I say that because it's true, because just like we had a Mason-Dixon line, the Italians have a line that, well, actually it starts a little lower than this, because this is Tuscany. The northern is the industrial part of Italy. The southern is where they do things like make pizza and sit around and have coffee. So there's always been this...
Calabria.
Calabria is one of them. Sicily is over here, so we get a little mention of that. So I have my grandparents were totally Italian. They were like Romeo and Juliet, and I start here because it's a wonderful story. They came from the same small town in northern Italy. This is called the Piedmont, very close to France. And this is Switzerland up here, so there's a lot of influence. And over here there's a lot of mountains. So those are like the soldiers that come from this area are called Alpinis because there's so many mountains. But they come from a tiny little town called Condove. My grandfather came from a very wealthy town of people in that town. They had all the money. They had all the real estate. They had a lot of the businesses. My grandmother was one of the poorer people in town. And they were like star-crossed lovers. They met when they were very young. And his family tried very, very hard to separate them. He was a musician, one of his talents. He never liked to really work, but that was one of his talents. And they sent him into the army so that he could play in the army band, hoping he could stay away from her. But, it's hard to stay away from what you want. So by the time, and they were always trying to separate them. They were never married, but by the time they decided that they really had to leave Italy or they were never going to be together, they already had 3 children. And my mother was in the oven. So they finally said, well, we have to do this. They only knew one person living in America.
You didn't know you were getting a geography lesson.
This is Illinois. The town I came from is down here. And everybody always says, like people from Springfield always say, oh, I live in southern Illinois. They don't live in southern Illinois. They live way up here in Springfield. This is southern Illinois. This is really southern Illinois. It's right across from Kentucky. And when you live there, the television you get comes from Paducah, which is in Kentucky. They knew one man who came from their village that lived in this town. I wish I knew the history because there's nothing in that town. But the main activity is coal mining because the old Ben coal was very popular in southern Illinois. Not that my grandfather ever wanted to work there. He went a few times, but then his job was to grow all the vegetables and all the fruit, to take care of the animals, and my grandmother went to work. So in 1944, which many of us probably can remember. I don't remember it too well because that's the year I was born. My grandparents settled in this little town, and they proceeded to have, my mother was the first one born in America, and then they proceeded to fill out the rest of their family, and they ended up having 3 boys and 3 girls. They lived in a 2-bedroom house, so everybody slept in 1 bedroom and the parents slept over here. I don't exactly know how they did that, but they slept the boys on the top and the girls on the bottom, or whatever they did. So when my father got drafted into the Army, and my mother's sister, Her husband got drafted into the Army. They were both pregnant at the time. So the two sisters went home to Southern Illinois to live with their parents. Yeah, well, the kids were gone by then. I mean, there were no kids. They were all off and doing something, but they went to live with their parents. So that's the reason that I was born in Southern Illinois, and that's also the reason I didn't meet my father until I was 10 months old. Because my father was busy over here in Italy. And he happened to be stationed in northern Italy. So he, before anybody else in the family, got to meet the family of my grandmother. So when he came home in 1944, along with my Aunt Gina's husband, and she had her son earlier than me. He was born about 8 months before me. So Richard and I were the only two babies that were there. My father came to get us, and Jean's husband came to get her, and we went up to Chicago, which is where we spent the rest of our life. All the sisters lived within a 6-block radius. They liked to be close, and our main activity was visiting the different houses. So I spent most of my time here until I was in my wild and formative years, which is around 1969.
Now,
The height of what was happening. Anybody remember what was going on in 1969? And it was going on over here.
Cold War?
yeah.
What's that? It's on the way on the other side of the United States.
Vietnam.
And I was right here.
Were you a hippie?
Sure.
I've always been a little hippie. I mean, I've never been slight and skinny. I wasn't exactly a hippie, but I saw a lot of hippies and I knew a lot of hippies. So I spent several years here, and then I came back. I just wanted to be silly and
Yeah.
use this.
Now,
Now we can start the story.
Okay, but you did spend a lot of time in visiting your grandparents?
Always.
Every summer?
That was our only vacation. 2 weeks in the horrible heat and humidity of Southern Illinois. My grandparents' house had 2 bedrooms. It had a kitchen and it had a living room. It had no running water. It had a pump. It did have electricity, which was good. It had no bathroom. But we had a nice outhouse. You just had to go out the back door and walk down past the chicken coop, and there it was.
So in the summer,
Yeah.
when the family came to visit, how many
What
people were
town was
living
that?
there?
The town is called Buckner, Illinois. Population 500 on a good day.
How many people in the family came?
Well, no, the sisters used to plan it out so that not everybody was there at the same time.
Oh,
And,
okay. Because
yeah.
that outhouse would be pretty busy.
Well, it's busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is busy, but guys can be in the garden. It's easy. My grandfather had a fabulous garden. They had this little house which was it had a secondary lot. And he, from the day he arrived, he started to cultivate that secondary lot into a garden. And above the garden, all outside the garden, were grape arbors, and he grew grapes. So he made his own wine. So his wine, and we had a wine cellar. And every night when we'd have dinner, he'd have one of those giant gallon bottles on the floor, and a tiny little juice glass, which was filled all the time. Yeah.
Now,
So
you
it was
didn't
great.
remain an only child. You,
No, I didn't.
no, when you were 7 years old, there was an addition to the
Yeah,
family?
there was like the sun shifted or something, and out of the blue came my brother,
Ah.
which ended my reign. which was very difficult. And at the time we were living in Chicago, in a house that had originally been a garage, which was made into a small apartment, had one bedroom. And I slept in that bedroom in a little bed with my parents. And a bedroom and a little living room, and it did have a bathroom, a working bathroom, and a small kitchen. But it was in the back of the house that was owned by my father's brother. My father had 3 brothers. I never knew my paternal grandparents because my father's mother died when he was very young, probably about 7. And his father, who was a union organizer for the coal company, dragged his 3 sons all around the Midwest to all the mining towns. And my father was born up in Hibbing, Minnesota. And then they settled into southern Illinois because the coal industry was pretty big. Here's an interesting thing. My father was raised in Johnson City, which is about maybe 15 miles from where my mother was raised. So they never knew each other when they were young. They didn't meet until they were adults. So, but that's the way they were. So anyway, my brother arrives, and
The prince.
yeah,
The prince.
he was a prince, and I was a princess. But you know how it goes. I tortured him for the first probably 4 months of his life. He would be in the crib. Now we had 4 people in the bedroom. I was in my youth bed. He was in the baby bed. My parents were in the living room. And I would sneak out of my bed, and I would put my hand through the slats of the crib, and I would tickle him until he started squirming and screaming. And then I would go right back into bed and pretend like I was asleep. And they would go in and, well, what's the matter with the boy? Why is that boy crying? You know. I did it until I got caught, and then I didn't do it anymore. But it turns out, like all things turn out, he is my best friend now. And he has wonderful children, and they have children. So those are the children that I have now. So, but it was pretty competitive. Because I was a princess because my father was terrifically attentive to me all the time when they were waiting to produce this other heir. And he would read the funny papers to me every Sunday, and he was going to art school at the time, so he was always back and painting something or drawing something, and I was sitting there. It's probably the reason that I like painting and art, and certainly, as I said before, it's one of the reasons I like music, because we always had music also.
Was your mother involved in art and
No.
the things your father did?
My mother was involved in all the things that make a house run. She was a fabulous cook, and she cooked, and she cleaned, and she did the laundry, and she paid the bills, and so that's what she did. You know, she at one time she studied to be a beautician. I don't know if I told you this.
No.
And she had a certificate, which it's a long story, but once I found that certificate, it caused a great adolescent upheaval in my life. You don't know that story.
Okay, sorry. You didn't hear anything.
No.
Now, you lived in the city, and did you go to Steinmetz High School?
I did. I went totally to public schools. That's all I ever did. More interesting than Steinmetz, before I got to Steinmetz, I went to a school which I used to have to walk to, which was only up the hill, and it was called Luther Burbank. It was a beautiful school. But at the time that I was going to grade school, the population for school-age kids, I mean, it was a huge 3-story school, and we didn't, it was way too big. So somehow or another, the CPS decided that what they should do is they would turn the first 2 floors of this school into a handicapped school. So when I was in about 5th grade, I think, the first 2 floors became handicapped accessible. And then they needed us to be, you know how you can be on the safety patrol and, you know, you get to wear the white belt? Here you could be a husky. That's what they called you. And it was apropos. I was husky. I thought, oh, I can do that job. So we did, actually I wasn't husky. I never was husky until later in life. But we became huskies, and then our job was, at the time we would have a fire drill or something, then we would have to go down, find the person that we were in charge of, make sure their wheelchair got pushed there, and we were, you know.
So it was a lot of responsibility.
It was a lot of responsibility, and it was actually a very good lesson to learn, to, you know, that there are many kinds of people, and they don't all have to be exactly like you. That was like my first entry into that. And then I went to Steinmetz, which was another giant high school, you know, again, 4 floors and tons of kids at that time. And then my issue became, as a high schooler, who do you want to hang with, you know? Remember Fozzie and, you know, Happy Days, and, you know, who are you going to be? Do you want to hang with the preppies? Do you want to hang with the kids that go out to the smoke shop and, you know, are always getting into trouble? And I was trying to bridge the gap between everybody and decide. And I met a physical education teacher. I happened to be in her class, and she was young and very interesting, and I got a crush on her. And I decided, she was talking to me, and she said, you know, you got to make up your mind. You're going to be a senior, and you got to decide what you're going to do. Who are you going to hang out with? You want to be with those people, or you want to be with those people? So I gravitated toward the preppies, because I figured I was going to have to go to college. And that's what I ended up doing. I went to Northern Illinois, which is in DeKalb. My freshman year, I did not study. I did not go to class. I learned very well how to drink beer and party a lot. And if I didn't like the class, I didn't go to it. So if you don't go to the class, you don't pass. By the time my grades came out, I was on probation.
Now, in college, because I had a daughter who went to Northern, you received the grades. Your parents didn't receive the grades. I mean, it goes directly to the student.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle that probation, and how did you handle it in telling your parents?
I handled it the best way I knew how. I went to my parents and I said, I don't want to go back to school. Why? I don't like it. I'm not happy there. I don't. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, I can't go back. That's going to cost another $1,500. You know, my parents didn't have a lot of money, you know. And I thought, oh no, I was going to disappoint them too much. So they eventually saw the grades and they said, well, you know, you could go back if you want. We'll let you go back. I said, no, I can't go back. It was all because I was felt that I was disappointing them so much.
Or did you lack the confidence to go back?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, did you feel at that point, well, if I really went to class and if I really did the work, I could probably do this?
Well, maybe I had a smidgen of that, but mostly I said, I don't want to work. And my mother and dad said, okay, you know, you can do whatever you feel like you want to do. And then they sat me down at the table, and my mother, who was also the person that made the rules, said, 2 weeks. I said, 2 weeks? What is 2 weeks? 2 weeks. And then you tell me where you're going to go to school, what you're going to do, what plan are you going to make. I'm giving you 2 weeks. I said, well, you're so generous, to myself. And then I thought, what am I going to do? You know. So I went to Wright. There was a junior college, Wright Junior College, and I took a few classes there. You went to Wright?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yes, well.
It's a good school.
Yeah, no.
It's a very good school.
Yeah. But again, you know, I took art. I took, you know, poetry. I took all the stuff that I was interested in.
Didn't you have to take the comprehensive courses?
Yes, I did.
Those were hard.
Those were not easy. Those were hard. And I barely passed them, but I did pass them. But I didn't think I wanted to go away to school. I thought there's got to be something else that I would like to do, and I really wanted to get out of the house. So, the prince was there, and he was a perfect student, and he was doing everything he was supposed to be doing, and he was an athlete, and this is the worst thing my father ever did. When you take the prince out, he'd have to meet all of his friends, and this was his habit. Oh, this is my son. And they do this to my brother. Shake hands. Shake hands. Make sure you shake hands whenever you meet somebody. To this day, he still shakes hands. Yeah. Anyway, that's an aside. So on my investigation and my ideas that I wanted to be somewhere, not live at home, I knew that. Although we had a perfectly nice house, but I just wanted a little freedom. I found that I could go to the hospital downtown, Passavant at that time, and I had a friend who was going to nursing school there. And if you went to the hospital, they had an apartment building you could live in. I thought, answer, perfect. All I had to do was get on the Grand Avenue bus and ride for about an hour to get down to here. So that's where I started to work at Passavant. Yeah. And I think I skipped over a whole period of my life here. Let me look here. Yes. Before I went to Passavant and before I did that, when I came back from school, and on my investigation, I found that there was a program that you could apply to and go to, which was run by the Daughters of Charity, which are the nuns with the big, at St. Vincent's Infant Hospital, which is on what used to be on LaSalle Street. And it was also, sometimes they called it the Chicago Foundling Home. And they had, at that time it was very popular to have homes for unwed mothers. And the nuns would take in these babies, and they had a nursery, and they took other children up to 4 years of age. So they had a one-year program there that you could go to and you could graduate from, and you get a certificate, and then you take a test given by the city, and then you could work in different kinds of child care programs. So I thought, I could do this, let's do this. So I went and took that program and met a lot of good girlfriends there, and we took care of infants, and we took care of 4-year-old kids, and until they got adopted out. So that was nice. And as a result of graduating from there, I took a certificate, I got a certificate, and my first job out of there was in Head Start.
At Cabrini Green? Is that when you went there?
Yes. So I took a job in Head Start, and I got posted in Cabrini Green, which was, it was illuminating to be there. And I had another teacher that I worked with, and we had all these little 4-year-olds. And this is my favorite story from that. One of the little guys in my class, his name was Excel. And I said to his mother whenever she came in to talk to us, I said, he's a really good kid. I like him a lot, but I'm always curious to know where did you find that name? How did you find that name? And she said, I wanted him to excel in everything he did. And I've never forgotten that, I mean, just what a great idea.
What wonderful expectations.
Yeah, aim high.
Yeah.
As opposed to Rhoda Morgenstern, whose mother always said, aim low, you'll never be disappointed. That was mostly if you were looking for somebody. So I did that, and while I was there, I met a girl who was in another volunteer program, which was called Vista Volunteers, which was the Catholic program for people that wanted to volunteer. it's kind of like the Peace Corps. And she was a teacher. She was a graduate teacher. She was a real teacher. And she came to me and said, this is how I ended up in California. She said, you know what? Because our time was going to be up, because it was like a 2-year that you did that. And she said, I've got this opportunity to drive a car of a priest I know out to San Francisco. And I need somebody that can ride out there with me. And I said, oh, I can ride out with you. I can ride in a car easy. So I went, this is another thing I had to spring on my mother. Mom, I'm going to go to San Francisco. What? I'm going to go to San Francisco. That's pretty far away. I said, I know. She said, you can't go without a job. I said, okay, fine. You know, so what did I do? I went to the nuns, and the head of the nuns at St. Vincent, her name was St. Vincent de Paul, Sister St. Vincent de Paul. And I said, listen, I have this opportunity to go to San Francisco, but you know, my mother said I have to have a job. Are there any nuns out there that would, you know, take in a Chicago girl? And she said, we do have a home there. It's called the St. Joseph Home for Girls. She said, I can write them a letter, and you can write them a letter, but I don't think they're going to give you a job until they see you, you know. I said, okay, so I wrote them a letter. They sent me back a letter, and they said, we have a job we can give you, but you have to get here first, and we have to meet you. So I somehow built that up in my speech to my mother, and I said, no, you know, I could get this job. I'm practically assured this job. I mean, I'm going to get this job. Okay, fine. And they let me go. So we drove out there, and we stayed in the priest's father's house, Mr. Callahan. He was about 80. And I went to interview with these people, and these nuns, and they said, yeah, you can have a job. You can be a house mother for the teenage girls. And what these girls were wards of the court. They were in this program because somehow or another they were taken away from their families. And I did that for the whole time that I lived in California. And I lived in California at the height of Haight-Ashbury. I saw every band you ever heard of during that time, including Janis Joplin and the Jefferson Airplane and everybody. And I was there 2 years. And I decided I was not made for California. It was just, I always said that in California everyone has the same malady. They suffer from this. And it's called asphalt lust. Because all they want to do is get in their car and drive somewhere and do this and go somewhere else, and they're not. I'm from the Midwest, you know. I want to go home so that I can, you know, visit my aunts and uncles and have a dinner. So I came home.
Was that about the time there was a death in the family?
Yes, there was a death in the family, and I really wanted to go. One of my aunt's husbands died, and I wanted to go, so I had to take one of those nighttime flights across the country so that I could be there. And then I thought, what am I going to do? I'm so far away. What am I going to do? How am I going to be responsible to my parents? And, you know, it was another illuminating thing that made me think I really wanted to be back in the Midwest. So I came back home then, and that's whenever I went to Pasadena and got a job, because I knew I could get an apartment. So I went into the hospital and I filled out an application, and what kind of job do you want? I said, well, what have you got? You know, I'll do anything. And there are several things that happened in my life that were like touchstones. When I met the Daughters of Charity, and then, you know, they helped me do this. And when I met the gym teacher, and she set me on the right track. So they're all like little touchstones that happen in your mind, which you don't realize when they're going on. But later on, when you look at them, you figure it out. And so I took the job that they offered me, which was a clerk in the chemistry lab. Okay? I did was look at the requisitions, put in the orders, whatever. It was a nice bunch of people that were working in there, and that was just at the very start of automation. We had one machine which did glucoses, and everything else was done by hand. So here's another touchstone. The woman who ran the laboratory, the pathology person, liked me. She thought I was nice and fun and thought I was a good asset. And I went to her after I was there for about probably 8 months or so. And I said, you know what? I said, I could do this clerk job. It's easy. It's not a problem. I said, but you know, I'm really fascinated by all of this testing that's going on. And I'd really like to know if I could maybe learn how to do some of that stuff. This would never happen today. And she said, well, okay. She said, you could see how they're done and try and do a few of the things and have somebody teach you and this and that and the other. I said, great. I could do them both at the same time. So that's what I did. And they started to teach me, all the techs started to teach me. And pretty soon they brought another clerk in because I was running the table and doing the testing. So that's how I started my medical chemical career. And I was at Passivant, which was a beautiful little hospital downtown. And then there was the bigger one, which was across the street from it, called Wesley. And that was the whole campus that was Northwestern. You know, they had the Stone Pavilion, which was the Psych Institute. And then I met a whole bunch of people, not only people in the chemistry lab, but I met social workers and therapists that were over there. And I loved being there, and I loved having my own apartment. I could walk, it was 1 block away, you know. And I could still ride the bus down on Sundays to see my parents, and then my dad would drive me home. But there was all this advancement made within the hospital situation, so it didn't take long for Wesley to overtake Passivant. So Wesley absorbed Passivant, and the labs had to leave. And there's only 2 people that survived from Passivant going to Wesley. I was one of them, and one other person. Everybody else quit because they said, oh, we'll get a better job someplace else or do whatever. That happened to me 3 times because pretty soon Wesley became Feinberg. And, you know, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if any of you who have doctors at Northwestern, you know how big it is right now. So again, I survived. So I went from doing manual tests in chemistry to when I left chemistry and changed jobs, we had an entire line, so it was totally automated. And when you had your blood drawn, it came in, it went on the machine spun it down, sent it around, they pipetted everything, and all you did was sit at a computer and look at the results and send things. So that's how I had that career, and I stayed in that job for 33 years. Yeah. And toward the end of my career, I moved into a management job, also related to the laboratories. The most important thing that happened to me at that hospital was that I met my lifetime partner, and also a person that worked in the laboratory. But she was totally trained. She'd gone to Marquette, graduated, had a graduate degree. She was actually my boss. So, you know, I'm always one to take a chance. So dangerously, I flirted with my boss, and pretty soon we were together for 40 years, actually.
No,
So,
when did you took a group to England?
well, that's later. That's coming now. So now I'm settled. I have a partner. We're still at the hospital. We're doing this and that and the other. We're living in a condo. We're buying a house. And I always had this piece of baggage that I was carrying around, which was, here I am doing this job with all of these college graduates, and most of my friends were like therapists and social workers, and I'm sitting there with nothing to show for it. So it always bothered me a lot. And lo and behold, I'm looking around, and I was living in Westchester, Illinois at that time. And they had to build a new corporate park. And what did they put in that corporate park? They put a division of DePaul University. And they put a brand new program in. And it was called the DePaul University School for New Learning. And it was a competency-based program. And I started reading about this and I thought, oh, this is just right. It's a competency-based program where they give you credit for life things that you've done. But it was not like you walked in there and said, oh, listen, I did this. And they said, oh, great, we'll give you credit for that. Now, it was very involved and very, it was not easy. And they wanted to start the very first weekend college, which meant that if I got into that, I would be able to work my regular thing and then just go to this for the weekend. And my partner was ecstatically encouraging and always said, just do it. I mean, you have nothing to lose, just do it. And I did it, and I was in the first cluster. It was the best thing I ever did. It was wonderful, and I was flew through the program, and I was on the dean's list, and I never, I finally felt like, oh, I'm smart enough. This is verification that I'm smart enough. So I graduated from there, and after I graduated from there, they asked me if I would come in and run one of these opening classes. They called it, I forget what they called it. It was something that told you about the program. So they would invite people who maybe were interested in the program. They would come, and I would give them this weekend seminar, 2 days. So I did that several times. And then after I did that, I was still working. And after I did that, then they asked me if I would work weekends as being an academic advisor. I said, sure, I'll do that. So then I was doing that weekend college, still working. It was great though. It's really lovely. And I felt really good that I graduated, and I could finally say, when somebody said to me, oh, did you go to college? I said, yeah, I did. Where'd you go? DePaul. Oh, okay, DePaul, that's a good school. And so also they said, I met several different teachers that were there, and they were going to be taking a group of students. These are all adult students now, okay? We're going to take them to the University of York in England, and they were going to be there for 2 weeks studying different things. But the professors had to be there first. So they asked me if I would be the chaperone for this bunch of students. I said, sure, I would do that. So my partner and I had to get all these students to O'Hare and get them on the airplane and do everything. So while we were doing this, my father got sick, and he was in the hospital and not doing real well, and I had to do this, and I called my brother and I said, I've got to go on this program, and I'm responsible for all of these students, and I'm worried about Dad. And he said, well, don't worry about Dad. I said, what do you mean don't worry about Dad? He said, if he dies, I will take over, and we'll put him on ice, and whenever you come back, you're only going to be gone for 2 weeks. When you come back, we'll have the funeral. I said, great. Okay, good. That's good. So I didn't worry about it. And we took off, we flew, we arrived in London, got our hotel. My partner went with us as moral support. I was asleep in the bed and the phone rang. 6 a.m. was my brother. Dad died. I said, oh God, what am I gonna do? He said, don't do anything. I'm just calling to let you know. Keep your plans the way they are, everything's gonna be okay. So that's what I did. But the next day I was walking in Kew Gardens and my knee collapsed. And I said, why did you do this to me? Are you trying to torture me, Dad? I had to go to the acupuncturist and get an acupuncturist and buy a cane. But I was fine. I just, thought maybe he was mad at me or something. So we came home and that was fine.
At one point, you worked, after this, you worked
You can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. I thought we were just sitting together. I didn't realize you were all here. You worked for a company that made testing equipment, or?
No, this is much later than
Yeah.
that. So I worked at DePaul doing that for as long as, I did it several years, but after a while it got to be too much. I was working full time and doing all of this. So, and it turned out that then my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I had to spend a lot of time dealing with that, and she was still living down in Southern Illinois. And so I had to take care of that and try and get her organized and settled and doing whatever. And I was thinking the laboratory at that time was getting very technological. And I knew that we were changing things, everything was changing. And we had been very blessed because we were always on the same schedule. So we never had to worry, we always worked the same weekends, we always had the same days off, and that was easy to manage, but it was changing. And they were going to divide the labs up, and they were going to have technical labs, manual labs. You had to decide where you wanted to go. And so I decided I had to find another job, and that's when I took the management job. And it was related to the labs, but it was running the outpatient labs when people would come in and do it. And that's when I realized that all my thought about being able to manage people was fictitious in my mind. Because I had to manage all of these people who were supposed to be there very early in the morning, so that when people came in to have their blood drawn, they'd just automatically take care of everything. And after the third time that the same girl told me that her grandmother got hit by a bus and she couldn't be there.
Was it the same bus each
I don't know, it was the same grandmother.
Oh, same grandmother.
And I said, maybe your grandmother shouldn't go out in the morning. Maybe she should stay home. And anyway, I realized that all my thought that I could handle people so well, which proves that with age comes wisdom, because I'm pretty sure I can handle people now. I was forced to go to therapy, which again was another very good thing that happened. So I went to therapy, and it actually helped. And then I realized I had to maybe it was time for me to leave the hospital environment. My partner was still working there. And that's when I was driving home from work, and I saw this about 2 blocks from where the condo was in Forest Park. No, it was in Clarendon Hills. I saw this house, and I said, "Oh, that's I call him nephew, but was really my partner's sister's son-in-law." And I pulled into the driveway, and I went in there, and it was a house that they were converting. They were doing some construction on it, turning it into an office building. And I said, "Oh, Gregory, what's going on here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm starting this building. I'm going to call it Laboratory Builders." And he said, "We're going to just do labs, build labs and do everything." I said, "Oh, well, that's sort of interesting. So what do you need here?" He said, "I really need somebody to run the office." Okay, here's another skill I don't have. But I said, "Oh, I could run your office for you. That's okay. We could do that." He said, "Okay, great. You start next week. You can just do this stuff." So I quit my hospital job after 33 years, and I went to work for him. And this is a multi-million-dollar company now. It's just grown like crazy. And but at that time it was not that big. But we had as a client Abbott Labs and Northwestern.
Wow, wow.
So that was really an entree into really getting our start at doing everything.
I hope they paid you in stock.
No, they didn't. But they.
You'd be very wealthy today.
But they did. He said, "Listen, I have to tell you what you have to do," because he was still working for another company, a laboratory furniture company, and he was a big national distributor. He said, "I'm going to make you the president of the company." I said, "What?" He said, "No, I'm going to make you the president of the company because I don't want this company that I'm still working for to know that I've got this company I'm running." I said, "Well, isn't that, like kind of shady?" He said, "It's a little shady, but it's okay. I'm going to quit this other job, but I want to make sure that everything is in place here." So I became the president of Laboratory Builders. I even got a card. But here's the bad part. I had to go to South Carolina all the time when they were having big meetings. And all the other people were, like all these guys from all over the United States. But I was fine. We did fine. And then he eventually stopped representing that other company and he just became Laboratory Builders. So I got to do a lot of interesting things while I was there. Not necessarily always presidential things. My favorite job that I did while I was there was the day that I had to, in the back of the pickup truck, drive Sue back to the Museum of Natural History. I had the head of Sue, the biggest dinosaur you've ever seen, in the back of the pickup truck. And I was driving down the expressway, and people were like, that was an adventure. I like that one. That was a good one. And it wasn't the real Sue. It was a Sue that they rented out from the Natural History Museum for like parties. You want to have a party, have Sue there. Yeah. So I did that, but at the time I took that job, my partner was diagnosed with Alzheimer's also. So that became, fortunately I lived close to home, and Gregory's wife was her niece, and Beatrice was her favorite aunt, and she, so they were very supportive of me whenever I was going through all of this stuff. And we had been making plans to retire up in northern Wisconsin, which is why when people ask me, I talk about Wisconsin and they think I'm from Wisconsin, but if I draw Wisconsin up there, that would be the next place that we went. So we made plans to build this house on the lake. We had some land up there, and we decided we would just go through with it. I mean, she knew what was happening to her, and we still wanted to be able to enjoy it. So she stayed at the job a little bit longer, and then we built the house, and then we moved up there and retired up there. And she was good. She was fine. We had one dog at the time, and then I decided that I think we needed to have another dog, so we rescued a Wisconsin dog whose main purpose in life, it's the dog I have now, his main purpose is to be a couch potato. And he was the best dog that I could have ever got, because he was a couch potato sitting next to her all day long, and she would pet him and talk to him and do everything. But I realized that I had limitations in my ability to take care of somebody like this, which I think is very important. You have to know your own limitations. And the other good thing I had no family problems. My family loved her. Her family loved me. Never once did any of those family members say anything to me about how I was taking care of her or the decisions I was making. All they ever did was support me in whatever decision I wanted to make. So it turns out, here's another touchstone. Her parents had retired up here, and her father became the very first administrator of the community nursing home. So they were very well known, her parents in the town. And he had a vision. He was a visionary, and his vision was that this is a small town. There are only 1,500 people in it. He said, we already have a nursing home, but what I want to have is I want to have independent living apartments. I want to have assisted living, and I want to have daycare. And they already had also 3 special houses for people with physical disabilities. And all of that came true, so that his wife, her mother, could use those, and we used them all. I started her in daycare whenever I realized that she didn't have enough to keep her involved. And I took her to daycare, and I started her in a half-day program. And I went to the person, a half-day program. I took her in the morning at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I went to the girl who was running the program, and I said to her, listen, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to give you something, and I want to use this. And she said, what? And I said, here. And I gave her 5 $1 bills. And I said, when I come to pick B up, I want you to give her one of those $5 bills. And I want you to tell her what a good job she did. And so the first day I went to pick her up, I got her and I brought her back, and we got in the car, and I said, how was it? She said, oh, it was good. I said, oh, it was? She said, yeah, there's a lot of people there that need help. And you know what? When I was leaving, Becky gave me $1, and she thanked me for helping her. I said, wow, well, that's really good. You put that $1 away, and pretty soon, we'll be able to go to the grocery store and you can get something. And it worked perfectly. And she stayed in that program for almost 2 years. And then we moved up to assisted living. And they had a very nice assisted living. They had 16 rooms and two wings. And I was able to go every day. It was 5 minutes from my house. And I would go every day. I'd take the dogs. Anytime they had entertainment, we'd do something. I was always a part of everything that was going on. And I would take her home on the weekends, or we could go for rides, do whatever. We had 2 weddings up in that, on our land. My nephew and her niece's nephew. Big weddings. And Bea was able to come to all of those weddings and be there for all of that. And it worked really well. She was in assisted living for a long time, and then whenever it was time to move from assisted living, she moved over to the nursing home. And that's where she passed away, at the nursing home. But these strange little touchstones happen in your life, and you don't really realize it whenever it's going on. It's really crazy. Here's a good story about and that sounds funny that I'm going to tell you a good story, but it's a good story about her weight. When she passed away, and she had always said, and I had always said the same for me, I want to be cremated. And we were Catholic, of course. So I planned all of the ceremony, the mass, and then I had to go and pick out the urn. So I was sitting there in a special urn room, and I picked out a nice urn, and then I was looking, and I saw this small little replica of that urn on the thing, and I said to Dave, who was the funeral guy, I said, what's that for? And he said, oh, that's if you would like to have some of these ashes. He said, we can put them in that, and then you can take it, put it on your mantle or do whatever you want to do. I said, oh, I'd like to have that. That's a good thing, He said, I'll do it for you. He said, but you cannot tell the priest that you have these. I said, oh, okay, that's not a problem. The day of the funeral, we're going there, and everybody's there. And he comes up to me and he says, "Listen." I said, "Yeah, what?" He said, "B is in your cup holder." I said, "What?" And she said, B is in your cup holder, but don't mention it to Father Hagen." I said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to tell him."
You would never believe it.
He probably wouldn't have believed it. So sure enough, when I went to go home and I got in the car, there was B. She was still there, in that nice little urn, which then immediately went up on the mantle and stayed there until her niece took her then and took her to her house. But strange things happen. So that's how I got here. I was up there, and I stayed 3 years after she passed. But it's 1,500 people, and everybody's married and has kids, and and I had friends. I had a lot of friends there, and I kept very busy. I was in a co-op. I worked in a co-op where we had little crafty things. But I was 7 hours away from my family here. And I was missing all the little kids growing up, and I thought, there's got to be something better than this. I've got to, because I can't, I'm going to turn into a toadstool if I stay up here all this time, or a hermit or some kind of thing. And the winters are very long in Wisconsin. So I decided this is going to be a research project. So I got on the computer and I started looking at and finding all kinds of places where you could go if you were an independent person and a senior. And I made a list. And I called my brother and my sister-in-law. And I said, I want to come down for a week to visit. And I want to go to these places and see what they're like. And my brother said to me, "Why do you want to do that? I mean, you got an apartment here in my house. And you can live there for free." I said, "Because I want my own space." You got to understand this. His wife understood exactly what I was saying. But, he said, "I don't know why you have to do that." Anyway, that's what I did. I came down here. I looked at several places before I got here. Once I walked in here, I said, "Oh, that's it. This is where I'm going to go." And I said to Carolyn Driscoll, "I'm going to come here." And she said, "Oh, great." I said, "But I'm only going to come here for 6 months because I'm not sure that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my house and this and that and the other." And she said, "Fine, you can do that." And I said, "Yeah, but I have 2 dogs." And she said, "Well, that's okay, you could do that." At that time, I probably could have had a llama. And she would have let us stay here. So, although I probably wouldn't have been a llama, but they are very nice. Anyway, so I moved here, and I didn't bring anything with me but my suitcases and my important papers, whatever they were. And I rented all my furniture, and I moved in. And I was here 3 months. And I went to Carolyn and I said, "Just let me sign a lease. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay right here." And it's got everything that I want to do. And then I sent all the rental furniture back, and I started to accumulate some other furniture. And on my next trip up north, I picked the things that I wanted to bring and whatever. And I've been here ever since, My brother still says to me, you could have saved a lot of money. You could have just lived here. I said, "No, don't you understand? I'm much happier now." Now he knows, because now anything that I'm involved in, they're always there. If the choir's giving a concert, they're the first ones to come. And the kids have all been here. Well, COVID, of course, changed a lot of that we can't. But now I'm able to go to every family function. I know all the kids. I haven't missed a pub crawl since I've got here, which is what my nephew has every year. And it was the best thing I ever did. And as I always say, coming here was like I discovered that no matter how old you are, you can have a second life if you want.
And you did say something to me that really stuck with me, and you said it's like being in college again.
Yeah, I felt like I was. It was the college that I never got to do because I was in weekend college, which was very different. I mean, that was important, but it is, and it is the importance of this place. And I preach this all the time, so you've heard it a million times. Is the community that makes it up. We're very diverse. We're all different. We all come from other places. But if you're open and you allow yourself to experience whatever you find that's interesting, you're going to be a happy person, I think. So,
I agree. And can we give her a hand?
She doesn't need that.
Trudy, would you please share the story of your mother at your father's wake?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is a wonderful story. My mother was in the throes of Alzheimer's at the time whenever my father passed away. And she was in the nursing home. And she got sick and he died before she did. So we planned the funeral. I got to plan this one. And she was down in southern Illinois. And I went down there. My brother and sister-in-law, my partner, and the kids, we were all sitting in the front row. And who comes to a funeral in a small town? All the old people. Okay? And it was full in the back with people. And what is a common denominator between old people? They can't hear. I'm talking about us now. They either can't hear and they talk loudly because they want everybody to hear. So we're sitting in the front row. And my mother's sister went to get her from the nursing home and she brought her in. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go get Mom and take her up there. So I went back there and I got my mother, who still recognized me at that time. And I said, come on, I want you to come up here. And so I'm walking her up there. She's over here. And I take her up there and we're at the casket. And she looks in there. And I said, she said, who's that? And I said, oh, that's your husband. That's my husband? I said, yeah, that's your husband. That's Rudy. Yeah, that's my husband. I said, yep, that's him. And she looks at him again and she goes, he's pretty good looking. And I said, yeah, he was always a, really nice looking man, My brother had taken care of him, he made sure he had a good suit, nice tie, nice shirt, Oh, okay. So then I'm starting to walk her back and she turns around and she looks at him. Yeah, he's good looking. I said, okay, Mom. And I take her, put her back there. And then somebody says, loudly, my brother's name is Philip. Somebody says out loud, do you think Philip is wearing a toupee? Because he had a lot of hair. He didn't have a toupee, but he was, it was the time whenever men had big hair and he had mutton chop. And somebody said, no, I don't think he's wearing a toupee. But when we heard that in the front, we're all sitting in the front. It was like one of those comedy shots for a television show. I started to laugh. B started to laugh. Phil and Patty started to laugh. The kids started to laugh. We were like, oh my God, what a crazy world. Yeah.
Well, you needed those laughs.
Yeah, it's always good to be able to laugh and remember.
So now I called you El Presidente, and I didn't realize that you had already been a president before Carrington.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, with your card. You didn't get a card here?
No card here.
No card.
No,
Oh.
I'm lucky I got a notebook that said the Carrington. I tried to get a notebook for Ron Farkas, but somehow I wasn't able to procure one. Yeah.
Well, we have to watch your budget. Gotta watch your budget.
Yeah.
All right, may we have some questions? I have questions. What? Okay. I'm coming as fast as my old people carry me.
Thanks. Trudy, what years were you at St. Vincent's, and did you know Sister Mary Alice?
I'm sure I knew her, but I can't exactly recall. Do you know which age group she was in charge of?
She was one of the administrators.
I'm sure I knew her, but mostly I was very friendly with Sister DePaul.
Okay. Questions? Well, where?
Right there.
Oh. Sorry about that.
A lot of people here probably already heard the story, but us newcomers haven't. And I always was wondering, how did you get interested in the butterflies?
The what?
Butterflies.
The butterflies.
How did you get interested in the
It's
butterflies?
just one of the illuminating things that happens to you here. I got introduced into the butterflies through Julian, who was already had done this before, and she just started talking about it one day, and I thought, well, that's sort of interesting. And monarchs, I had known about monarchs, and then she brought them in, and then it was like, oh my God, I got sucked into this, and it was so fascinating, I couldn't not do it. And then this year she tried to take away the naming rights that I had for the butterflies. And she said, maybe it would be nice if we let the residents name the butterflies. And I said, I made a terrible face, and I said, oh my God, you're going to take that away from me? That's my favorite thing to do. After all, I don't have any children. I wouldn't have been able to name children. She said, all right. I'm not going to let everybody else name it. And I said, no, that's not nice of me to be that way. We'll let them name it if they think they want to. Or let's name it after residents.
That's what I've been noticing lately.
And so let's name them after. And this is a beautiful story. On Haima's birthday and Angel's birthday, which are a day apart, we had two monarchs that were born. And one was a girl and one was a boy. So I said, let's name them Haima and Angel. And okay, that was great. That was perfect. And I got to let the girl go that day, and I took her out of the cage and I held her, and she stayed on my hand for quite a while. And then she took off and she flew. It was the most beautiful day. The sky was absolutely the bluest it could be, and not a cloud. And she was on my hand, and she flew up, and she flew straight up in the air. And somebody took a picture of it. And it was like, oh my God, it was just absolutely beautiful. And we've had, it's a successful program. Last year we only let loose 41 monarchs. This year 22. This year we've let go 41. So I'm hoping some of them are learning Spanish in Mexico.
Yes.
But if they're not, it's a fabulous thing, and I don't think we'll ever not do them now.
Their grandchildren are coming back.
That's probably true. That's probably true.
Yes. In fact, Julianne is all into butterflies, as you know, and today she announced that she has some milkweed seeds that we need to distribute again along the pond here.
Right.
Because they seem to grow very well there.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
there will
true.
be butterflies. I saw some hands up here.
That's
What
okay.
happened to
There's
the
only
hands?
nobody. That's all right.
Okay, well, let's give Trudy a Thank you.
Just remember that coming up this year, we're going to have an election. And when we have an election, make sure that you pay attention to what's going on and vote in the election. But be advised, and I'll tell you this, our board, our resident board, is an advisory board. And don't come on to the board or attempt to run for the board if you think you're going to come in there and you're going to make a lot of big changes. Because it ain't going to happen. Because all we do is advise, and we bring all of this stuff to Tom, who brings it to the other people, and the management decides what's going to change. So that's what you have to remember. Because lots of people think that they're going to make a lot of changes, but it doesn't happen.
Well,
But you have to talk about it.
yeah,
We still want people, and you know, this is your place, and this is your home. So keep it in mind. Yes, dear.
Will you run for president?
I have to run for president again because my term is up now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go out of your way every day
To make someone's day. Say hello. Talk to somebody.